Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to all of you. We have studied on the provisions related to generation, distribution, transmission. We have understood that what all activities are being delicensed under the new act, and then the activities which are now regulated and licensed one. So, we have studied in earlier sessions that transmission, then distribution, these two activities are licensed and regulated, and we have also tried to understand that how the law has been enacted, how the law has been designed to bring in more competition in the power market in order to promote the interest of the consumer. And in this regard, the provision related to open access has a phenomenal role to play, and in today's session we will be studying the provisions related to open access and what are the initiatives taken with regard to the same. And before we try to look at that how the law attempts to implement, how the law attempts to operationalize open access, we should see that what are the measures which are being taken till date. The idea why I am highlighting this before getting into the provisions which are talking about open access, before getting into that how the regulatory commissions are being authorized to implement open access, that what all has been done till date, how the open access has been initiated, how the open access has been implemented till date, what all has been done to bring in vibrancy in the power market. Now, when I look at the scheme of the law, what I find that the law categorically suggests that the power market has to be competitive, and competitive here what would mean is the involvement of multiple players. Competitive here would mean that let the rule of the game be determined by the independent regulatory bodies, and the different stakeholders follow the rules and contribute in the growth of the power market. Now, in this regard, when you look at the very preamble of the Electricity Act of 2003, and the preamble becomes a very important source of law. As a law student, we know that there is interpretation of a statute, where the provisions of law, if there are any ambiguity in those provisions, then those ambiguities are being resolved by taking help of different aids, be it external aid or be it internal aid. And preamble in that regard plays a significant role in helping the court to clarify the ambiguity. because preamble is an observation, preamble is an objective to understand the minds of the lawmaker, that what they intend to achieve. Preamble facilitates in unfolding the views of the lawmakers, that what they intend to achieve by enacting this law. That is what is the role of the preamble, that is what is the purpose of the preamble. And when you read the preamble of the Electricity Act, you find that it is clearly been indicated that necessary measures are to be taken to develop the industry, electricity industry. And one way of measures suggested is to promote competition. When you look at the implementation model of this objective, that how this objective is to be implemented, what shall be the mechanism to implement the same, and then you would find that open access is one way, an important one for bringing in the competition, and through that contributing to the development of the industry. So, the idea of open access is impliedly ingrained in the preamble, in the language of preamble. And the way the opening up of the market is being designed, it is not an exaggeration to say that open access appears to be the soul of the electricity law. And in addition to that, you would find that 2016 you have a tariff policy, which we have discussed in the earlier session, where it has been categorically indicated that it is the competitive bidding through which tariff is to be determined as far as possible. And that is what we are experiencing in case of the agreements arriving between the generating units and the consumer, what you also call in terms of longer agreement is power purchase agreements, long duration agreement. So, one is to settle the pricing through bilateral understanding based on the guidelines given by the regulatory commission, and the other one is to allow the market to grow in such a manner so that the dynamism would be there on the pricing, and then the efficiency would come in the market. And that would be possible when you have this competitive bidding for buying the electricity, and that is what has been envisaged, that is what has been attempted to implement in 2006 national tariff policy. Now, in order to give necessary impetus to open access, in order to give it a operational shape, 2008 again it was suggested to have a scheduling of power exchange transaction, where the idea of power exchange market was conceptualized, where if you draw an analogy, it is something like trading in electricity, where you would find that the surplus power or where the generating units are not interested in engaging into long term PPAs, are looking for the buyer, and the buyer is negotiating a price which is going to give economic rate for the buyer. So, universal open access to transmission networks are also designed under it. What would be the benefit of universal obligation? So that transmission network would be available to all the players, be it generating units, be it the distribution network, by paying the certain charges. As we have been studying that this market, this sector is a cost intensive sector. Lot of capital expenditure is required to operate in this market, and therefore, it is not feasible to have one entity spending the amount which it cannot recover, and that is why it has been suggested that let there be unbundling done, and then with that unbundling the network can be efficiently utilized by all the players, all these players of the different segments. And also it has been suggested that there should be a separate procedure for day ahead market. Day ahead market, what does it mean is that where the requirements are being informed a day prior when the transaction is taking place. This will help in informing the generating units that what are the requirements, and also for maintaining the grid discipline. That is what is also important, that is how it will be done. Now, 2008 this is what has been done. 2009 an important change has been done where unscheduled interchange charges and trading regulation has come into it existence. Now, what is unscheduled interchange charges? Now, ideally when you look at the power market, ideally how it should operate? Ideally it should operate in such a manner where there should be perfect balance between supply and demand. So, 1 megawatt is needed and 1 megawatt is getting generated, ideal setup, because we know very well that an electricity is one product which cannot be stored. Having said so, let me also inform you that lot of research going on to build storage capacity for electricity. So, when this perfect match is not happening, when supply and demand is not being met in a very ideal sense, that what is being demanded exact volume is not getting supplied. Then what would happen is that there would be some variation. Variation could be in case of over injection of electricity, or variation could be overdrawal of electricity. Now, this can very well disturb the grid, this can very well lead to the collapse of grid, and thus it has been suggested through this regulation that let there be a disciplined behavior on the part of the generating units and the licensee or the consumer, so that any situation of overdrawal or over injection or underdrawal should be kept in mind. And this would also help in earning revenue when there is a demand and there is injection of electricity done by the generating units. Then obviously, the generating unit for supplying that electricity would be getting higher tariff, higher value. So, if you recall, I have briefly talked about the mechanism for fixation of tariff, which I will be talking in detail when I will discuss tariff, that there are three components: fixed, variable and unscheduled interchange. So, this component is playing a significant role in not only ensuring discipline in the grid, but also for generating an opportunity to earn more or pay less by the generating units or the consumer or licensee respectively. So, this is another important measures which has been taken for facilitating open access. Now, 2010, you again find that electricity grid code regulation has come into effect, and this is for making the power exchange market more robust. The idea is that we know very well that now grid frequency has been stabilized between 49.5 to 50.05, and this is what is the frequency in which the grid has to be maintained. Now, this very discipline, this very measure has given a confidence to the generating units as well as to the licensees that as long as they are going to maintain it, there will not be any issue of supply of reliable electricity or quality electricity. So, these regulations help the generating units to plan for selling the electricity in the open market, or this is also in a way encouraging the buyer to get the electricity directly from the generating units through the open access mechanism. 2014 is another important landmark kind of proposal, where it has been suggested that let there be a segregation of network and supply. We have discussed in detail about this in the last session, where we have said that this is what is the proposal to separate the wire business and the supply business. This would bring in necessary change in the distribution segment, and obviously if you can recall, this is what I said, that more vibrancy in the distribution segment, better is the prospect for the growth of electricity market, because of the very fact that if you confer more choices to the consumer, consumer will certainly expect better services, and better services then will become a norm of the market, and whosoever would be giving better services will have a larger clientele, and in that process no denial that there will be a very healthy competition amongst the players of the market. Now, you would find that certain developments have taken place also between 2015 to 2020. One important one is ancillary services operations regulation. This is all about bringing in a sort of mechanism where the congestion in the transmission network is to be addressed, so that any situation of destabilizing the grid would be addressed by either the generating units or by the licensees, and accordingly they will get the benefit on the pricing of the electricity on the tariff. Efficiently they manage the network, better is the benefit at the front of price fixation. 2019-2020 has brought in another important aspect to again leverage the open access system, is the introduction of real time market operation. Now, you can very well visualize that with the change in the consumption pattern of the consumer with regard to electricity, it is very difficult to evaluate the pattern and plan accordingly. Nowadays, good number of home appliances are being used by the household. Considerable improvement has happened on rural electrification, and all this are strengthening the power market. And all these initiatives are also in a way bringing a sort of certainty in the power market. And what is that certainty? The certainty is in the form of real time market, that let there be no conjectures on the withdrawal of electricity, peak demand, off peak demand, what shall be the mechanism. Let it be a well accounted mechanism, and obviously in this regard the information technology is playing a significant role. So, real time market operation is another significant, I would say, intervention to introduce, to facilitate, to promote open access. Now, moving ahead from the crisis on the generation, Electricity Act has made the generating activity as a delicensed one, and then also provided for captive generation, so that the large industries can very well have its own setup as far as the need of electricity is concerned. So, this situation of supplementing the generation capacity certainly takes us to the situation where there would be electricity to be traded in the open market, because when you do not have the surplus, when you do not have the very robust mechanism for generation, when you do not have the assured capacity to generate electricity, there is nothing which can be traded in the open market. So, delicensing captive power plant has promised that. It has promised that there would be a situation where the electricity as a commodity will be traded in the open market. And for ensuring the same, it has suggested that let there be non-discriminatory access to transmission and distribution network, which we will be discussing in detail in the coming session. What is the law related to this? And as I said, that initially from a highly regulated sector where there was a complete monopoly of the state, now with the 2003 Act, state has been completely asked to stay away in regulating the market. State has a very minimal role, very minimal role, in a sense where there is a need to intervene on the issue of public interest. For example, what we discussed under section 11 of the Act, what we have highlighted under section 37 of the Act, where if the matter is involving of public interest, then only state can involve. Otherwise, the Electricity Act has come up with a framework where the sector is being allowed to be regulated by an independent body. And all this is being planned, all this is being designed to develop the electricity market. Now, when you look at the open access market, you would find that it has two different kinds of division. One is across the boundary and the other one is within the boundary. interstate and intrastate open access. So, one category is with regard to geographical boundary. If it is interstate, then the responsibility to formulate the regulation is of the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. If it is intrastate, then the responsibility lies of the State Electricity Regulatory Commission. Apart from this geographical division, you also have the temporal division, where it is all about the time frame, where you find that what it is there could be a possible of open access for in a long term setup, where you have more than 12 years timeline which has been suggested. The nodal agency for the same is Central Transmission Utility, and then you have a medium term, where it is 3 months to 12 years. For that again it is Central Transmission Utility which has a responsibility, and then you have the short term which is intraday to 3 months time, where the responsibility is given to NLDC, National Load Dispatch Center, or Regional Load Dispatch Center. So, if you look at the development of open access and how the regulations have been developed, how the regulations have over a period of time facilitated open access, you would find that much has been done to make this a reality. Much of this has happened in order to ensure that the consumer which is looking for open access, looking for supply of electricity other than the distribution licensee, should have all the necessary encouragement, and the same is the case for the generating units. Now, these regulations, if you look at it, it is not very difficult to make out that it is largely been made considering the bigger consumer in mind, considering the industrial consumer or commercial consumer in mind. But then that is also highly desirable, because industrial or commercial consumer buy bulk of the electricity, and therefore, it is well expected that they would be looking for buying the electricity in a very on a very competitive rate, and which is possible only through this open access. Right now, the way the open access operates, the consumers are divided into two categories, I would say. One consumer which has the requirement of more than 1 megawatt, for them there is a choice of supplier, and then consumer without choice of supplier is one who has below 1 megawatt. So, this is how the open access for consumer is being planned. In some of the states, there are initiatives taken to provide for open access even for the smaller consumers, but then challenges are there for making it a complete success. Now, this is what we will discuss in this. We have discussed in this session. In the next section, we will try to understand that what are the provisions with regard to open access. Thank you very much.